Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Traveling Molly's, March 2023. We've been doing this a couple years now virtually. And
And we've
say
done
hello to my
it a couple of
co-host.
decades. And we've done it for a couple of decades.
Yeah, but
Unvirtual.
unvirtual. And there's Nina Corwin. Say hello.
Hi. Welcome from Mexico.
Yes. Yeah, that's the beauty of doing things virtually now, where people are all over the place. Before we get started with our open mic, let you know, everybody out there in YouTube land, hang out for our two features tonight, Ricki Cummings and Rachel Galvin. Thank you so much for being here, you guys. And as always, we'll get started. Nina and I will start the ball rolling, so nobody else has to be the first up to bat. And I'm going to read a poem that's the ink is still wet on, which I don't normally do, but you know, it's an open mic, right? So try something new out. This is a poem called To Roll the Stone. The snowplow shoves a large round stone where a car wants to park. I heave, push with my back and legs to roll the stone away. Maybe to find a secret hidden underneath, the melting story of long winter giving to new spring. Or maybe to release a whiff of wind trapped there, a wind to muss my hair or brush my eyelashes like a forgotten kiss soft on an eyelid, or to prime the pump of loneliness in my heart. Or maybe it is the breath of a wind that moves your hand under my pillow in the darkness of our bed to find my hand, warm fingertips in our night when the heart chants a chord, the quiet song between us. And this is my best reason to roll away a stone, the secrets they're waiting. That's that. Thank you all. Nina.
Sure. Every once in a while, I write a poem that that is an analogy for a common issue that my clients are dealing with. And this one is called Serial. It's 2 parts. I'm not sure if I'll read the second. But the epigraph is from My Fair Lady, when Henry Higgins says, "Pickering, why can't a woman be more like a man? In love, I find your right leg in my Levi's, my left in your Lee's. We are a 3-legged race at an Independence Day barbecue. This never goes well. I start over with somebody new, each craving the taste of the other. He is lean corned beef. I am thick Jewish rye. Life is our delicatessen. We eat ourselves sick. Hours later, one of us gets a taste for Italian, the other's in the mood for Thai. We wake sheets still bearing the creases, each learning to walk alone again. Another chapter, merrily, 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 merrily. I dream a double helix, he 2 tops spinning side by side. With men, the problem is monolith. With woman, the problem is bottomless trough. You Stonehenge, I spit. You Mariana Trench, he snarls. He sticks my tongue out, says everything bounces off me and sticks to you beyond babble. Bricks, bats, cats, dogs, which one of us uttered such things? We wake with our own words in our own mouths. Echoes inundate the room. So I'm going to introduce our first reader, and then I'm going to move inside because we're getting a little wet here. Tristan, who hasn't been with us since we were live. Let's hear from you.
Thanks. Thank you for starting us off too, Al and Nina. All right. Hi, everybody. Got a couple of things that are in the works and still untitled, so they might be a little rough, but the current study has several limitations that warrant discussion. That said, that is that when winning little gets discussed, winning is equated to doing, losing is equated to dying. Somewhere in between, there's a game. The presence of other athletes likely affected the actions of the athletes. The role was conflict, and the role conflicts out of the way if you're too slow. Americans love sport because everything in sport is excess. But oh, my love, I would if only there weren't so many impacted. Participation in youth sports is at an all-time something, which means leisure, which means wealth or poverty. Suburban kids play soccer or swim. The athletes in the distance perform body surveillance in the mirrors. Clap, 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 cheer. The people watching at home know their shirts don't matter, but we still wear them. There's always next year and other cliches of losers, loser talk, and loser excuses. Winners know how to win. Tautology knows how to tautology, knows how ad infinitum. But it all goes away if you win. The teenage boy collapsed on the court and died due to undiagnosed heart condition. My teammate drowned in the pool, so we wore black armbands for the rest of the season. I hope Jamal can find peace in the way he wants bury me at midfield, but only if we win. Nah, thank you. I'm gonna one more here. Still untitled. My body is my vessel and my machine and my tool and my pride and my restraint and my teammate and my controller and my opponent. The body is a shape. My body is a shape. The body shapes. Opine what's, sorry, I can't read my handwriting. Opine what's round and soft around the edges could be more angular and take 5% from there. Can you report your weight is, circle as many as apply. Normal, yes, no. Over, yes, no. Under, yes, no. Around, yes, no. Through, yes, no. Other, yes, no. I can calculate my weight score and divide it by movement, goals to get to well-being. The questionnaire asks body, how do you cope with challenge and change? Over half of the body will be dissatisfied with the body, with mirrors. Final reflections, you never see the inside parts if you can avoid it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tristan. It's good to see you here again. I think the last time I saw you was in person at the Buzz Cafe.
Some 3 years ago, I'm sure, if not more.
Yes. Yeah. Nice poems. Next up, I want to call somebody new to Traveling Mollies. Serena, I'm probably going to say your last name incorrectly. Is it Okerzeski or Okerzesic? Is that it?
It's Okrasic. Yeah.
Okresic. Okay. Well, I knew I wouldn't say it right, but welcome to Traveling Mollies, and Serena's in the new issue of After Hours, so I'm really glad to have her in there. So welcome.
Thank you. So tonight I'm going to be reading 2 poems. The first one is the one that's being featured in After Hours. The night smolders eternally. Burning love letters in your backyard bonfire, spread the ashes on the sidewalk. Not enough to spell out all my regrets, but with a blackened, bleeding fingertip, I try. The fire crackles, consuming a bed of bones, the skeletons you finally took out of your closet. You like to destroy your past, pyromaniac, holding a lighter to your memories and grinning gleefully, sending them up, a smoggy smear against the abyssal Asher sky. You're a parasite in my mind forever. You changed the tubing, fingertips like cattails all too soothing, smothering the signals in my brain, smoothing my electrostatic hair. The charcoal grit grinds into my skin. The calluses never saved me like I thought they would. Thank you. And then this other poem I'm about to read is Abuse, and it's titled Abuse, and it was in my school's journal. His slender frame, traced with bluish veins like cracks in porcelain, her body bending and nearly breaking, knobby knees knocking, sooty eyelashes like spider legs shivering, squinting against the soft, steady, cold breeze. Bodies bony, pale, and ghostly, like wraiths drifting through black strands of smoke, souls scattering like the late October leaves. Disembodied fallen angels, plagued by the pain of separation, deteriorating, separated, and separating. Delicately rolling joints, carefully, tenderly, as if caressing a child, precious, or as if cautiously treading a careening cliff, a precipice. Passing around a joint, stuff it, light it, inhale and fail to exhale, coughing, catching, choking, retching. Their life, their death, their pleasure, their rapture, tastes like rot and smells like death, heavy grief and a wretched laugh, the normalcy of killing yourself. Me and her, we just sit and smell. All we can do is sit and smell. The air closed in, contained and constrained, the taste in my mouth, spit that's canned, the crawling sensation of contamination on my skin. All their desperation, all my dread, distractedly swirling inside my head, not a shred left. I am not satisfied with this grime. I have learned to hate myself, this thing I am, irrational and endless. You should ruin your life. Let me help you ruin your life. Let me take you. Let me have you. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Hope you'll be back. How about if we're going from somebody who is a long ago reader to a brand new reader. I'm going to go with somebody else that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. Judy Valenti, I'm so glad that you are here.
Well, thanks everyone for those beautiful poems that preceded, and Alan and Nina for the opportunity for me to read some new poems. As you know, I've spent, like Patrick, a long time as a journalist. My career was in journalism prior. And how do you write about this gun violence in the United States? So I made a little attempt here, and we'll see if it works. This is called Litany. The throat of the world thirsts for blood. Trigger finger itches for metal. Ear hungers for the rat-tat-tat of a scatter shot. No one is safe in a kindergarten coat room, an outdoor concert, a darkened movie theater, the produce aisle. Heads explode like grapefruit, spent rounds spread like sawdust on a supermarket floor. There are bullet holes in skateboards, skin tissue on history books. A schoolyard turns into a graveyard. Lower the flag to half-mast. A nation stands accused. Nina's in Mexico, and I best months of my life last year living in Abruzzo, Italy. So here is a poem about that period of time. Abruzzo. The woman who owns the weary-looking pizzeria sometimes sings in the piazza in a dialect I don't understand, her thick black hair streaming behind her. She has few reasons to sing. Husband dead at a young age, raising 2 daughters on her own, and only the same old men come as customers. This morning at La Madonna del Carmine, Dom Ermino tells the usual half dozen of people in the pews to keep doing good, even if their efforts seem like a drop in the ocean. We are both the drop and the ocean, Dom Erminio says. In late afternoon, the children come running from the Scuola Elementare, waving their crepe paper drawings at parents and grandparents who wait to hug them alongside parked cars, as though all the children in the world could be so loved. I know it's not true. Sometimes I walk along the Hollyoaks on Via Garibaldi, collect seeds that look like wooden beads, arrange them in patterns on my bookshelves. Sometimes it feels as though I'm moving through a dream, like the one last night where I was dancing on a stage. My partner lifted my feet, swung me around in the air. The church bells sound the hours, remind me this is my life. The silent mountains with their sharp scented pines, the sweet smelling sheets flapping over balcony railings, the flatbed truck that sputters up a hill as Vincenzo, the driver, shouts into a loudspeaker, carciofoli, mandarini, mele, patate, pepperoni. My neighbors appear from behind faded doors, wave and call to me, "Buon dì." They welcome me home. And one more, one more. I don't know about you, but the summer of 2022, last summer, was a really hard one with all those kids dying in Texas. And my husband was in the hospital. He's never sick. He was in the hospital 4 times. And so this is a poem that tried to capture kind of the angst of that period, and that'll be it for me tonight. Thank you for listening. Summer of 2022. The flags along Interstate 70 fly at half-staff, lowered for the children and their teachers at a school in Texas where the lunch bell never rang that morning. The vocabulary lesson still stares silently from a chalkboard. A friend of mine writes, "I am so moved by the little girl who played dead to save her own life. What have we become? What have we come to that we must teach our children to do such a thing?" In a hospital room, the blinking monitor measures my husband's pulse, the space between his breaths. The lighted lines rise and fall like mountain slopes. Over a loudspeaker comes the call for a code blue, room 13A. A heart stopped in mid-sentence, mid-breath. Nurses awash in aquamarine scrubs rush past. Later, Brahms' lullaby floats through the hallway, signals a baby born. Perhaps song is stronger than death. We want to be sunflowers, always leaning toward the light, but the desert holds its hidden springs, secluded mysteries, opens its dry mouth to the sun. Some days I am the golden daylily, spreading my light. Other days, shedding petals like minutes on a clock. Some days I am my neighbor's collie, now snout pointed toward the wind, baying at the sturgeon moon. Across an ocean, war and more war, and above the earth, a telescope somersaults, peers into remote reaches of the universe, like a god so far from the children in Texas, my husband, the daylilies, my neighbor's collie, a god that perhaps also feels loneliness, terror in the night. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. That was so nice. Hope Charlie's doing better. Next up, someone who's becoming kind of regular here with Traveling Mollies, and another after hours contributor is Patrick Reardon.
Hello, thanks for having me here. It's such a rich thing to hear everyone's poems and all the different ways they approach things. As Judy said, I was a journalist for a long time, and I think what I've found is that I've tended to I write a lot about Chicago, but I also kind of tend to make up stories. So this first poem, it involves a couple characters that show up in various poems of mine. One is called Plug Nickel, and the other is called Red Cent. So here's the poem. Let me tell you, Plug Nickel and Red Cent met on art museum steps, and inside, mystic with blue innocent Delarobia. Rhythm the light shine white of beyond, above, bright, horizoned warm milk fired clay like flesh, godchild in supple mother embrace, sigh of centuries. Out straight west they drove their wood-paneled station wagon, out past the 3000s, the 4000s, nearly to the 5200s, on the tabletop Chicago grid, out to Leamington to meet the gray pants boy, sitting on front porch steps in full view, a white-red striped t-shirt, buzz cut, good boy. Out from inside, away at large, watching ant gang heft cornbread crumbles, except this one alone down sidewalk square to an insect promised land. He looked up at the two men, vaguely priestly, vaguely outlawed, said, I'm looking to flee captivity for the sin I don't recall committing. We're guilty too, they said. And the three walked to afternoon church for Stations of the Cross, flaming altar candles up, reaching always up, echoes, shuffling, Latin abracadabras, plain song up, incense up, from censer, from burning coal, straining up, cloud of unknowing, cloud of Mount Sinai, cloud of breathing and not breathing. After amen, the three split up and went home by a different path. Thank you. The second one I'm going to read is it's less of a direct story, but more of kind of like a mosaic of scenes. It's called Chicago Vespers. I hear in the sparrow's hollow bone Chicago Vespers. In cool, high-ceiling silence, the dark church, a wordless psalm. I shave my head to cipher myself, join the lost tribe's pilgrimage in the barrio. Woe the bully boy, woe the white-collar sneak thief, pain displayed. Leaf, branch, bark, silent as stone. Scream taboo, scream heresy, scream betrayal, violation, failure, scream bloody murder. Scream despair, misery, abandon, scream. The fall of snow on the communion of saints, processing cracked Clark Street sidewalks, water, wine, chrism. Eyelash, earlobe, molar, fingerprint, the flesh of the lung. Mozart and the others, sons of God, order in chaos, door opened and closed, At the street corner, a monastic in his cell, blank ecstasy. The Red Line L train. Prayer wheels in the dark. Thank you.
Two journalists tonight. Thank you. And Mimi Rosenbush, nice to see you again.
I'm going to read two poems. The first was published in the fall. It's called My Cinematic Day. My cinematic day could be projected on a movie screen because the day is real and fabricated at the same time, just like in the movies, where time is inside out, like socks in a dryer that magically animate into film, tumbling in ribbons to the laundry room floor at California and Devon in Chicago. I'm in love with the movies like my mom and my daughter, but in my work, I used to count frames and read tiny numbers on negative and positive film, settling sprocket holes on metal wheels with my fingertips. I can still feel the emulsion of negative film, subtle velvet like the wings of a butterfly. Watching from my plastic chair, the laundromat becomes its own Hollywood, where I am in the movie with everyone around me. Laundry sounds soften as the editor slides up treble and bass, allowing an accordion player to steal the scene. And the audience weeps as the camera slowly zooms through the cloudy laundromat window to a Paris sidewalk cafe in just another day of cinematic paradise. The second is a new poem, the TWA Hotel at JFK Airport. The TWA Hotel at JFK, stuck inside a vinyl scratch with no way out, this music stuck, playing endlessly on curved cement hallways, carpeted plush red, endlessly playing 1962, a musical memory museum for a fool in love who gets sucked into a jet in 1962, landing where she doesn't want to be, but she can't escape the architectural reruns, landing in sunken living rooms on white plastic tulip chairs. Spaced, aged, it promises Tomorrowland, and I'm stuck inside a vinyl scratch with no way out. This music stuck. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Mimi. I think I've been to that hotel.
Yeah.
Next up, William Harrison. Bill, what do you got for us this month?
Yeah, who's this William guy?
That's the name on your
Sounds
book, right?
sounds no.
Do you have
No.
Bill on your book?
Wait, book. Speaking of book, there it is.
Oh, there it is, Bill. It's not William. Okay.
It's not William.
Never
No,
call you
no.
William again.
Thank you. You'd better not, or I'll come over there. So I'm going to read an excerpt from my memoir that's going to be out in June. And the one thing you need to know is, so I was a musician. That's what this is about. And there's a kind of work that musicians do, playing private parties, weddings, bar mitzvahs, crap like that. I mean, things like that. And the generic name for that kind of work is jobbing. So I use that term in here, just so you know. The setting for one memorable wedding I played was a South Suburban Rotary type club. Rob, the guitarist, singer, leader, Jules, the drummer, and I knew something was up as soon as we wheeled our equipment into the club's party room. This joint would have been the ideal setting for a small town slasher movie. Everything was drab. The odor of mold and old style hung in the air. We set up on a badly in need of refinishing auditorium stage. I worried that our amps would blow out their fuse box. As we readied ourselves, someone carried in a long formica table, the kind you might see at a church potluck, and positioned it on the floor in front of the stage. Then they laid out dozens of plastic shot glasses, along with several bottles of Jim Beam. The three of us gave one another the universal side-eye expression for, what the fuck is this? People filtered in, dressed like they were attending a barbecue, not shorts and t-shirts, but almost. The band, overdressed in our sport coats and ties, eased into our first set of innocuous bossa novas and polite pop tunes. Not 15 minutes later, someone called out, "Beam me!" And guests rushed to the table and threw back a shot. I'd never seen anything remotely like this. Uh-oh. If they keep this up, we'll be lucky to get out of here alive. And keep it up they did. Throughout the remainder of the evening, random people would shout, "Beam me!" at random moments. Luckily, once Rob broke out the Rolling Stones and Steppenwolf repertoire, the increasingly inebriated guests staggered onto what passed for a dance floor and gyrated to our music. At least they like us, for now. At some point, a guest slur yelled, "Freebird!" And the cry was taken up by several other wobbly partygoers. Well, that didn't take long, Rob told us, his back facing the unrulier by the minute crowd. Taking no chances, he launched right into Jumpin' Jack Flash, which mollified the crowd. When we finished our final set, we heard the inevitable calls to play one more, and then the chanting, "One more song, one more song." Rob led us in an abbreviated version of "Gimme Some Lovin'," after which we put down our instruments and started packing up. The crowd got the message that we were done for good. We absquatulated out of there as fast as humanly possible. The three of us reconnoitered in the parking lot. Rob had procured the check and we were safely out of the danger zone. Well, this is one for the annals, I said. I can see the headline now. Wedding band survives satanic beam me ritual in South Suburbs. Yeah, tonight was more like a circus than a jobbing gig, Rob said. Then he added his oft-repeated post-gig call to arms. Come the revolution, there'll be no more jobbing dates, fish-faced enemy of the people. Jules, the most stoic member of the trio, shook his head and wordlessly ambled to his car. On the drive home, snippets of the evening intermingled with bits of memories from a first gig I played in a bowling alley with my friends Corky and Ted. Humility, my friend, that's your takeaway from this one. Anyone can play a cushy job in a fancy ballroom. It takes a real jobbing warrior to make it through gigs like this. Thank you.
And stories like this get told over and over and over and over, like dad jokes.
Having been a jobbing musician at one time, I have a lot of those stories too, and they do get told over and over again.
So you would think that there would be enough stories like that you wouldn't ever have to repeat one, but there you go.
Much like dad jokes, they have to be repeated over and over again. And you of all people should know that.
Yes, well, yes. So I'm going to take a moment before introducing our last open micer to urge people to donate some money to our features, because you guys have heard me, some of you, for 20 years, say that we like to pay our features because it kind of seems like the thing to do. The way you can do that is to sign on to the After Hours site and hit the donate button there. And it may look like Al's going to get the money, but Al's going to get it and distribute it to the features.
I will make it easier than that. I'm going to put the link for the donation to our features into the chat and into the YouTube chat. So it'll be there for everybody. You won't have to look far.
Great. And Ricki, well, Ricki's not here, but Ricki and Rachel, think about whether you have a pressing desire to go first or second once we begin the feature portion of the evening. And another old friend to help us wrap up the open mic, Shelley Nation. Good to see you always.
Hey, good to see you as well. So over the last 5 years or so, I've been writing about the Cherokee history through my ancestors. So this is my third great-grandfather, whose name was John West, and this is entitled 100 Lashes. Arms tied together in front, each forearm hovering over the plank, my shirt in my mother's arms, her face wet with tears, sobbing for pain yet to be delivered. The first lash, lacerations creating maps along my back, moist with sweat, or is that blood? My mind stealing through memories, writing a torrent of emotions, 10 lashes. I'm sitting in a pew in a courthouse, log house, earthen floor, instructions painted on walls, telling us where to sit. Listening to statements from both sides. Archilla Smith on trial for his life, 20 lashes. Isaac Bushyhead, the prosecutor, Stand Weighty, the defendant. Us knowing this was all a setup, knowing this is another way to make the treaty party pay. Taking all my strength to stay silent, 30 lashes. Witnesses tell the story. McIntosh rode into the Muskogee camp, Archilla inside visiting, horses knocked together, McIntosh's attempt at theft. Archilla's anger erupting to dance along the fire's flames. McIntosh charged, Archilla stabbed, McIntosh punched him in the face, then fleeing, dying moments later. 40 lashes. One witness to the stabbing. First trial, no verdict. Second trial, conviction. And we all knew that there was no turning back. The war that was already rampant just blew up in our faces. They were taking us out one by one. The West would be next. We were forced to play our part. Cold water drenches my face, forcing me awake. 50 lashes. My mind is now at the elections. Pistols packed, gloves attached, Bowie knife in my belt. 5 or so of us heading out to the counting. Isaac and the others packing up the ballots. We approach them on the street, 60 lashes. I see my brother grab Isaac, stab him with his knife, over and over and over again. I focus on the breathing, the in and out of his life, blood spewing. My father grabs David Van, others jump in with clubs, pulling David off his horse, dragging him onto the ground, dirt flying into the air, 70 lashes. I see myself in a dream, jumping Elijah Hicks, beating him with fists rumored to be lethal weapons until Ross's men pull me off, 80 lashes. My mind switches to my father's body swinging, hanging for a murder he did not commit. I focus on his movement, swirling in a circle, 90 lashes. Of words clashing through fists, of constant anger, of retribution for Archilla Smith, of dizziness as I begin to slump, 100 lashes. I collapse. blood running, open wounds, peeling flesh, a sense of loss from a consciousness better left in another world. I am feeling my spirit dissolve. Thank you.
So, thank you, Shelley. Thanks to everyone in the open mic, and greetings to all of you on YouTube. We are going to get started with the features, after which we will have a Q&A. But before I do that, I'm going to need to find the bios. Oh, so Ricki and Rachel, do either of you have a preference about going first or not?
I have none, no.
Ricki, if you want to go ahead, I don't mind either way.
Okay, it's decided then.
Wait, what was the decision?
Ricki will go first.
Okay, I can do that.
Okay, don't lose that number. Yeah, you probably heard that before, huh? Okay, I still can't find it. Do you have it in front of you?
Me?
Al, would you read Ricki's bio?
Okay, I will do that. Well, okay, we're happy to welcome Ricki Cummings. Ricki Cummings is a trans writer currently living in Chicago, whose most recent chapbook, A Void and Cloudless Sky, was published in 2021 by Finishing Line Press. Their work has been published in Poetry, Vellum, Court Green, Caliban Online, Solstice Literary Magazine, Columbia Poetry Review, Allium, and has been shortlisted for Vellum's Award for Poetry. They received their MFA in poetry from Columbia College, Chicago. And here they are tonight. Welcome, Ricki Cummings.
Hello. So I will be reading pretty much exclusively stuff from A Void and Cloudless Sky, which you can get pretty much anywhere you can get a book. So I'm just gonna start at the beginning and go from there. This is the first poem called Concatenation, which is the process of like adding things to a list. 8 bytes of yellow dots on a page to track ideas. This is all honest thievery, and of 3 dreams of car crashes and kaiju, the music is to disengage the cerebral cortex, a lizard brain patois shortcut. Narrative is arboreal, bits of time wound around chair legs and infrared remote controls. The cat ate the last pizza, the last puzzle piece. You found it by your ankle, pinned and screwed. In place, the man offers knowledge in exchange for a job. Nailed to a tree and sacrificed to himself. Ravens piercing sides, it's hard to tell in the heat. Skin dry and glands dry and lungs dry and the rain torn like a sheet. It rattles when it all comes together, or it sizzles like cherry steel quenched. When it startles is when it's working. No elephants in these parts. There are no gay people in Chechnya. I don't think we have anything like that in our country. Plans for the day, backlogged entries empty, agendas forgotten, erased. It seems cryptic, but there's always the word coalesce. The solar system was once a disk of dust. The moon was once the earth, now fragmented, tiny, lacking the whole of the spiral center. Captured umbral, the corpse will be auctioned if the address below, if word is not given. Note if, pardon me, at the address below, if word is not received, notice is given. Decision covered in ashen glow. A fragment of syntax and a man surviving a plane crash by sleeping becomes necessary. A flaming chariot pulled by dragons, transporting the dead, words and music by Patty and Bruce, and screamed for decades. Things put in ideas, drinking piss water to own the lid. Institutions to change your life. They go in through your nose and they let you keep the little piece of brain they cut out smiling. The originals were all frauds. Novels, the dreaming said one, a creep. Thank you. This is another poem titled Your Grandpa Was Like That. Listened a lot and didn't talk much. There is no other poem titled that. I speak to the common man when I say, remember the Krebs cycle, for indeed we all must stop and breathe from time to time. Someone recently told me on Twitter that one of my favorite comedians was an asshole, as if I wasn't already aware. But he also put the greatest pigeon pun of all time into a joke about the Kennedy assassination. So who's the real asshole here? I spent the better part of a month learning how to build a robot that writes poetry based on the works of H.P. Lovecraft. And now I'm not so sure what's real and what's the bot. It picks out engrams, strings of words, and then reassembles them according to esoteric math using modules with names like TensorFlow, which really isn't that far off from name-dropping Cthulhu or the black goat of the woods. Here's a kitchen sink for good measure. For future generations, the answer to the question of what is this poem about is the body, always the body. I don't see why they have to shove it in our face, says my mother to my face, when we talk about my attraction to men, my predilection toward hobbies socially engineered to keep me poor and possibly dead. In the abstract, I do not exist in this booth across from her, eating eggs I am allergic to. We somehow managed to read the same book and come to wildly different conclusions. Sometimes I think I understand the tendency for black metal bands to murder each other and burn down churches, but other times I think they do it out of boredom. So anyway, the Krebs cycle. The mitochondria is the end of this sentence. When ATP is split, a tiny amount of energy is released, which then gets redirected into reconstructing ATP. The human body is a perpetual nowhere machine, continuously hanging and bootstrapping. Adenosine triphosphate, by the way, that was going to burn at the back of your mind all day, I'm sure. Nearly 20% of the blood sugar in your body is used by your brain to process this stupid shit. Aren't you glad you're here? You could be arguing with your mother, or actively harming your intestines, or fucking a stranger, or sleeping, and yet this reconstituted tree aspect, causing the air to vibrate, is what you've chosen. There was supposed to be a metaphor here, but instead it's maps and pins and bits of string and wild hair and cigarettes and unemployment. I remember that one of the purposes of poetic alliteration is to pull the reader or listener shrieking through the work. So maybe they forget for a little while how what is said doesn't quite make sense, pulled slant, as it were, and full of illusion that doesn't quite fit. 6 years, and I still don't think it's right. What I mean is this. In an automobile drivetrain, we must take into account the fact that the wheel on the inside of the turn is actually moving slower than the wheel on the outside. This is simple geometry, yet it breaks bones. I noticed last night that there are people I'll never see again. For the first time, it hurt. Sometimes I don't fall asleep until the sun comes back up. I don't know why. Sometimes I repeat myself and I do know why. Sometimes I tell myself that bitches get shit done, but it never seems to work for me. I end up on a beach with knifed up crabs who speak what sounds like Spanish but might be Italian, something Latin regardless. The crabs, arthropodin and sideways, seem concerned with my keyboarding skill. I tell them bitches shit get done, but they don't seem to want that. Imagine yourself running on a beach, pursued by crabs, unconcerned with your productivity, but obsessed with your ability to communicate. You should have stayed in school, went for more than 2 years of a foreign language, lived in Central Europe, stayed in your genetic lane. Now it's all eye stalks and crustaceans. You're fucked, bud. Down to eating peanut butter straight from the jar. Oh, what do the crabs signify? We don't even know what kind of crabs they are. Hermit crabs, Alaska king, whichever ones are the sideways walking ones, most likely. That probably narrows it down to something like 100 species. Can someone Google that? Kidding, don't bother, unimportant. What is important is that we recognize that crabs and humans require oxygen to run their animal acids across the beach and to sit steaming in a diner. Cellular respiration, it turns out, is so complex that the interaction of proteins and transport networks and broken bonds can only be described by a diagram. So I draw my mother a picture. Here is a normal person, say you. Here is me, also a normal person. And my mother, she insists, you'll always be my son. Thank you. This is titled Coming Out in Idaho, which I don't think is about coming out or Idaho, but you know. I woke up to my brain skipping frames like an old movie or a video card pushed beyond its limits when attempting to render a world. To look for joy, do not look for meaning, a beat. To look for a girl, do not her vulpine rictus, teeth ablaze. We see conspiracies everywhere in order to make order. Do not over-celebrate this newfound knowledge. Who yet knows what lurks in the universe's deepest holes? Popping baits and discs on fire. Filter speaks. When I was young, I'd drive until almost lost, then circle back to the turbine, its low-grade groan and midnight power thrust into the sky. Gravel and ethylene glycol. We drink till the dogs came into the bar, then offer the dogs drinks. Ralph's no longer exists, replaced by a granite sign and sod. Fragments and stoplights. Radiohead. Driving stone sober on deserted sidewalks, stopping for directions. That's where we had our first kiss in the rain, a living cliche, do not look. Only ghosts now and then. I was walking down the stairs for breakfast, skipping class, syncopation and 12-tone mass, collisions and near misses. Knowledge comes at a cost, sex or death. Curiosity is insatiable. Spiraling the same fletchless arrow, my heels come from the men's section, masculine and blunt. 2 pairs of cardinals, 3 chickadees, one of them albino, and a blue jay, sent as harbingers, assassins, symbols. Every day is a plan for dying. We are a fever dream, a migraine of the heart, or shared blood, an explosive thud against the pelvis triggered by stress and cured flesh, a flicker at the edge of the ventricle, the left to the body. A straight line must become an arc because nature isn't perfect like that. I sleep in rotations now, like the weather, vortices of dreams and memory. If only putting down words was easy as picking them up, as easy as sleep, rain. This one is called Arthur, and it's highly influenced by Philip K. Dick. Handler, always constructing and assisting, eyes through the mouth or throat swallowing static. Points in space-time connected by fiber optics and vapor wave. Mickey Mouse, inside the suit, it's me, and it's me, or it's me. I think these high rises are fictional constructs built on the shared belief in rebar and dopamine pathways. The left hand does not know what the right brain is thinking, ambiguously dexterous. I once replaced a concrete rock in a park with a real rock. The video is hilarious. There's a whole crew of Imagineers dumbfounded by the real within the unreal. A stone unturned, a single side up, and just as effective. Few words seem as suited to their task as scramble, no matter the context. Eggs, jets, a foot race to blue flowers, dies in sleight of hand. The fucked up black swan part, I couldn't remember. Not that I was trying. I remembered involuntarily wrong. This next one is called A Poem Wherein Everything Goes as Expected. And 4-6 years after I wrote it, I finally read House of Leaves, and I realized that it's actually really similar to that book. So, like, I don't know what happened there. I don't know. A poem wherein everything goes as expected. One night, I got lost in my own house. All the rooms were the same, but different. I walked up and down the halls and stairs, looking for a book, I think, and then myself. I'd fallen through the floor, not as if a crack had appeared like a gaping fault in a movie, more like I slid through it, like a sheet of ice, down into a room I know did not exist, could not exist. I'd already checked where this room should be, and yet here I was, in a room I'd never seen, but definitely had become a part of my house when I wasn't looking. I have been concerned about the difference between why and how why is oblique and why how is concrete. Here, how I got there was easy. I fell frictionless through the floor. Why I got there, though, seems less obvious. This room that doesn't exist in the space I'd already been, a dusty double of cinder block and a single mousetrap with ancient cheese and cobwebs holding it down. I remembered then a dream of a spider crawling onto my hand and biting the flesh between my thumb and forefinger, on the pressure point that leads to the cervical vertebrae. And then another dream wherein a small snake bites the same spot casually, filling its mouth with my blood all the way to the back fangs, where childhood legend says garter snake venom is released. I am calm and observe the snake, who is not angry or hungry, only sending a message to my brainstem. Thank you. This one is called a weirdness magnet. It actually contains a line from the musician St. Vincent and a line from Kurt Vonnegut as well. I say, bring me your finest collection of weirdos. And the waiter nods and returns with a blue healer and 4 small rocks. I hug each tightly, then line the rocks on the sill and let the dog herd butterflies and grasshoppers like Ferdinand smelling flowers under a cork tree. Bring me your loves, she sings, and I shiver in torn pleather. My breath cracks ice water. This is a new ritual, and the single caught bob nearly runs me into a bride piling. I like to tell people I'm a witch, because if I say it, it makes it so. I have to tell them I'm joking when I say that my retirement plan is waiting for a nuclear exchange. They don't laugh as much as I do. Pink slime is a beef slurry used to concentrate calories, lower fat content, and alarm the general public. It runs under the streets and leads to outbursts of emotional distress. I have a general theory about food additives. The waiter doesn't care. He's too busy handling the table of lobster claws. They seem to want the Wellington, but there's an obvious language barrier and everyone is having a hell of a time. So much for articulating. I traced a sign for protection on your back and it seemed to only half work. I'm not sure what I did wrong. Maybe we were still too close to it. Shelley says that all poetry comes from an excess of passion, and at 29, all passion is excessive, expulsive. When one is upon his second marriage, excess seems the only answer. There's some design flaw here. What to do, I ask the waiter, between snapping claws, when the cause and the cure is the same? And the librarian, quietly pulling up a seat to the table, says, you've got to be kind. And this is going to be my last one. And before that, I have something that I actually wrote down because I want to say this correctly. So this is my last poem. And before it, I want to thank Nina and Al and Rachel and all the open mic participants. And I want to implore you all, if you live in a state, territory, or country that is working to systematically outlaw queer people and trans people specifically, please do whatever you can to combat these efforts, or we will run out of places, me and my friends, that we're able to do this sort of thing in person. So if you like live poetry, please do as much as you can to combat. Thanks. So, poem. This is Growing Up in Public for Lou Reed. I could never answer a fireman, a policeman, a spaceman, any kind of man, really. The world rusts like an old country bridge. I want to kiss so deeply that I can flick the inside of your sternum with my tongue and make love like it will save me from drowning in a lake of leaves and train tracks. I want to feel the electric hum, the galvanic touch of sweat and blood and sex that vibrates down to anti-muon. Mostly I lie in bed and wait for nothing in particular to come to mind, and it comes. I sit in the dark in the bathroom on the cold vinyl tile made to look like stone. I wait for visions, for voices, but none come. I empty myself like all the jacks suggest, and still the passing thoughts are about my lack of passing thought. After masturbating, Ginsberg heard the voice of William Blake. All I ever hear is the voice of my racing pulse and the whining whistle of low-grade tinnitus. I knew Jack Spicer, sir, and you are no Jack Spicer, married and with child and poorly dedicated to love and linguistics. Ask me now what I would like to be when I grow up. An Irishman, a woman, a tall, smoldering brunette in stockings held in place by garter snakes and seams running from struck heel to crushed head. I want to be a drunk full of Berkeley and a head full of acid rain, pitted breasts and hollowed eyes. A white picket fence between two dazzling blondes in Dior A-line. The curve of Audrey Hepburn's jaw, boot leather. Catalog, ideologue, cartographer, dictionary, a tool to stir the stew and moldy genetic necklace of oyster boils and aqua vitae and matters of country. I'd like to be a head of state of emergency. A quick body pun and the core becomes non-corporeal. The press secretary laughs like shrieking steel. The walls fade into the parkway and the stars in the asphalt become the eyes of America overrun by cars and the light pollution of 1,000 neon signs proclaiming victory over sex. I want to be the song of crickets, ever present, unsettling, and beautiful. Thank you.
That was really wonderful. And I've already been formulating some of the questions I'm going to ask in our Q&A. Yes, we'll get to them. And Rachel, I'm looking forward to hearing you read. Let's see if I lost it. You know, I had myself all set up with the bio, and because there was a link to it, and I'm going to know how to do this now. All right. So, the reason I'm having such problems is I don't have a printer down here in Mexico. So usually I have all this preparation that I'm all set. Rachel Galvin's newest poetry collection, Uterotopia, was published by, is it Persia? Books in January 2023. She's also the author of Elevated Threat Level, a finalist for the National Poetry Series, and Pulleys and Locomotion. She's done translating, she's won prizes, and let's see. Her writing appears in Best American Experimental Writing 2020, Best American Poetry 2020, Boston Review, Fence, Gulf Coast, McSweeney's, The Nation, The New Yorker, oh my, and Plowshares in Poetry. This is going to be fun. Oh, I was going to ask, where are you? Oh, there you are. I was telling people that before you got on that there is a book I saw the title of somewhere that was, I'm going to get it wrong, but something like Vasectomania. Okay, so obviously you have not heard of it, and it probably is not called that, but it is kind of a counterpart for Uterotopia, but we're going to listen to some of that, and I'm sure some other stuff as well. Rachel Galvin.
Oh, thank you so much, Nina. I appreciate that. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Al. And it's a real pleasure to be here in the series that I've heard about for a long time, and haven't been able to be part of this virtual space that you've created until now. Happy to be reading with Ricki and all the other poets. This is just a real, Tristan Leip and everyone else. This is just a real joy. So yeah, Uterotopia just came out. Here's the book. Came out with Persia Books. I'll put the link in the chat. It's hot off the press from January. And I'm going to read a selection of poems from it. Here we go. So the first one is called Little Death. When a man traps a fish, he removes the hook from its side. And once it has beaten its fright into the wooden boat with its slaps, he will clutch the fish to his chest and hold it as it struggles. He will hold it in the tender air. He will hold its tail as if it were his dance partner's waist and gaze into the fish's face for minutes. When a man seizes a fish, he soothes it, caresses its body tip to tip, while it thrashes bloody against his bare chest. He will clasp the fish with one hand like a newborn and hush its gasping with the other. With love, he will tuck it under his chin so he can feel its heartbeat in the insistent heat that hangs above the water. Remember, when a man captures a fish, he will seduce it while he slaughters it. The strength of his love can't be simulated. The sound of the green water can't be simulated. He will kiss the wheezing gills, and his kisses can't be simulated. He will hold it as it struggles, that little death. He will hold it in the tender air. The next poem is part of a series of poems that are all called corpse pose. This one's called corpse pose. There's no numbers, corpse pose, like the Shavasana pose in yoga, when you just lie flat on the floor like a corpse pose. Pretend you're dead and we will eat you. My 4-year-old nieces insist I lie still and close my eyes. Pretend that you're really dead. They make munching sounds, yum, 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 while pretending to eat my torso. And then S grabs her doll, saying, I'm going to eat this baby. Yum, 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 yum. At night, I look into the mirror and whisper, hello, baby. Pretend you are dead, and begin chewing. At the Hyoan Healing Center in South Korea, you can practice your own death in the company of others. Write your own obituary and give it a trial run. Among candles and chrysanthemums, you may say prayers, put on a yellow or white burial shroud, and the envoy from the other world will nail you into a casket for 10 dark minutes. You may photograph yourself with your coffin. An 800-year-old churchyard reclines under the rotting apples in Oliver's orchard. Toddlers grab green, yellow, red apples with glee. A wanton bite here, toss it away. A bite there, toss it away. Child becomes apple, becomes child. The young doctor jokes, we're going to put you in the juicing machine. We'll make Fred juice. How about that? We'll drink you up. To which 5-year-old Fred replies, I'm not an apple. But we all know he is. The Met was evacuated when Roger threw ashes, white as anthrax, into the orchestra pit. Ashes, he later said, were the remains of a friend whom he wanted to scatter within the houses of music, so he could listen forever, a tender dismemberment as remembrance. With the Met as 9th stop on his opera tour, trying to lighten the mood, I told Terry they would never be able to vacuum all of him up. Twice today, I've seen squirrel carcasses mashed into the ground by cars, fur like small flags, grave markers. It is the 11th year of the war against the drug cartels. At least 150 people have died. A girl paints a second mouth made of marigolds on the side of her face, decapitated, disappeared, buried in clandestine graves, thrown in garbage dumps. Only chins and hair visible, women wearing skeleton masks march in remembrance of the 6 women killed every day near Juarez. My 4-year-old nieces are playing with a doll they call Aunt Sophia. Aunt Sophia falls off the 3rd-story balcony and says, ouch. She's taken to the hospital and receives new legs, new arms, and a new head. Aunt Sophia falls off the balcony again and falls off the balcony and falls off. Aunt Sophia falls off the balcony again. And the lady who cuts the umbilical cord watches over her bones. Well, no one ever said breeding was easy. That's the title of the next poem. It is an abecedarian poem. So it's an acrostic where the first letter of each line is A, B, C, D, but it's braided so it also goes the other direction. So it's A, Z, B, Y, C, X, and so forth. Well, no one ever said breeding was easy. Attempts for years to have a child, gives up, adopts a child, and gets pregnant. Zipping your lips is what they call it when you pretend it doesn't hurt. Budgets for 4 rounds of IVF, has 3 miscarriages and 1 healthy baby. You should just adopt, people say. Ceases taking depression meds so as to conceive and grows suicidal. X-rays are what they call it when they squirt you full of iodine to check your tubes. Delivers a stillborn baby and then miscarries. Wage gap is what they call it when women make 77 cents for every dollar earned by men. Eclampsia is what they call the seizures that land her in the hospital in her 8th month. Visa officers block pregnant women at the border for fear of what they call anchor babies. Freezes 6 embryos just in case and then gets pregnant by accident. Uterine cancer is what they call it when you're exposed to toxic chemical waste. Geriatric mother is what the doctors call you when you're pregnant over 35. Transvaginal probes are what they put inside you when you seek an abortion in 27 states. And it's probably more now. I wrote this before Roe versus Wade was struck down. Has an abortion, has a miscarriage. Senile vaginitis is what the doctors call it when you're in menopause. I lost at least 1 book, maybe 1.5, to raising my kids, she says. Runs a marathon while bleeding freely, blood staining her legs. Just home from the hospital with her newborn when her wife leaves her. Quits her job, drops off each kid with a different relative, and drives away. Keeps trying, keeps trying, keeps trying, keeps trying, keeps trying, keeps trying. Pregnancy wastage is what they write on her chart, meaning her baby is stillborn. Laughs out loud when she discovers she's pregnant at 50. Not expecting her period. Oh, I skipped a line. Other women are her main source of information about what to do. Married for 15 years and can't convince her husband to have a child. Not expecting her period, she wads up toilet paper in her panties, but still bleeds through. Never wanted to have kids, and now she's stepmother to 3. Mother makes her sleep in the cowshed until her period is over. Ovaries are hyperstimulated by IVF drugs, and she gains 15 pounds in 1 week. Luxury items are how tampons and pads are classified for taxation in 33 states. Pretends everything is just swell as she miscarries during a job interview. Keeps quiet when people call him the mother, even though he birthed their baby after transitioning. Questions her choice to have a child to strangers in bars for years. Jails and prisons in the US force women to work 21 hours for a box of pads, 27 hours for a box of tampons. Resolves to have a baby on her own and meets a new partner while 7 months pregnant. Incompetent cervix or inadequate pelvis is what they like to say to lay the blame on you. Suffers the loss of 1 twin in utero, and the second stays in intensive care for a year. Hostile uterus is what they call it when your body blocks sperm like a champ. Tells no one she's pregnant, not even her partner, until the abortion is over. Good news, it hurts like hell, but I swear you won't even remember it later. Used a donor egg and smiles every time someone says her son looks like her. Fair practice is what they call it when she doesn't get promoted because they suspect she might have another child. Vacuuming the eggs out of her ovaries leaves her aching when she wakes. Exhausted by people mistaking her for the nanny because she and her son don't have the same skin color. Why don't you just adopt, people say. Decides to give up her newborn for adoption because she wants to finish high school. X-rays of her fallopian tubes hurt more than expected, returning to work after the procedure. C-sections mean the doctor gets paid more and they're in and out in an hour. You should just think about adopting, people advise. Buys food, but no tampons this month because she's too broke. Zygotes are overrated, says her friend with no kids. Adoption isn't an option. She can't opt to adopt because she's broke, too broke. She's broke. She's too broke. Thank you. So one thing I'm really excited about with this new book is that it has my friend's painting on the cover. So this is a beautiful painting by the contemporary painter Vera Ilyatova, who lives in Brooklyn. And I've known her for many years, for 2 decades. Some of the poems are written in response to her paintings in this book, including the one I'm about to read to you, which names her in it. And I was beyond delighted when she agreed to let it appear on the book cover. So it feels very meaningful to me to have been writing in response to her work for this many years and then have this collaboration become a real thing, a real object. So this poem is called Fine Arts, and it is written after a poem by W.H. Auden called Musée des Beaux-Arts, which you might be familiar with. And it's called Fine Arts. Fine Arts. About women, she's never wrong, the young painter. How well she understands their predicament. How they must resemble bright red poppies while someone else watches them eat or take off their coat or just walk down the street. How when the old men are passionately waiting for them to bend and reveal their cleavage, there must always be girls who are still children, who did not at all want it to happen, strolling by a pond at the edge of the wood. She never forgets that it keeps on happening anyway in a corner, some humdrum place where men get on with their lives and their locker room pranks, scratching their balls and the ears of devoted dogs. In Vera Ilyatova's Softly, Softly, for instance, how 2 girls grab hands and turn away when they see the body lying in blood. A third, in a blue scarf, may have heard the screaming or heard the silence after, but she did not know what to do. The sun went on shining as it had to on the girls disappearing into the grass, disappearing into the river, disappearing into the desert. And the indigo blur of a neck elegantly turned away belonged to someone who might have seen something, but had things to do and went on with their day. Thank you. This poem is called In the Seam of Life, which is a call out to the poet, the amazing experimental Canadian poet, Lisa Robertson. In the Seam of Life. In the mirror, I'm watching my alternate life. I mean, this life I seem to be living is actually the other life I might have lived. You know how you or your friends sometimes think, what if I hadn't married X or taken that job or had those kids? I should have been a pianist, my high school social studies teacher used to tell me. I should have been an actor, my father would say. I always wondered what kind of sex life I would have if I didn't have those 2 boys, my friend confides over a glass of wine. Maybe I'd be sleeping with women instead of men. Yes, definitely sleeping with women. Here I am dancing before a mirror, watching my alternate life unfold. I've kept my figure, as they say. I have a nightlife and a sex life and a creative life, an intellectual life. I'm even growing some plant life on the windowsill and some bacterial life in my shower. Watching myself dance in the middle of these years in which I am single and living alone. What am I getting at? What I'm trying to describe to you isn't déjà vu. It's more like the rumble of a movie playing in the theater next door. Families eating, laughing, arguing, putting food on each other's plates as I trudge through the snow by a fleet of restaurants docked like cruise ships. I switched to a film in which I too have a family and am putting some food on my daughter's plate. I greet my other life in an effusion of glowing lights. I know how the feeling of comfort and assured futurity is made manifest by a mass-produced lamp that glows relaxing golden amber number 60. The truth is, I long for the lamps, the messy plates, the children's laughter, but I don't know how to enter the restaurant I'm passing by on a frozen April evening. It used to bother me more, but now I see that even if there was one, I couldn't find the door. Thank you. Tender commodities. Tender commodities. People migrate by crowded bus or crowded car. People cling to a freight train or an inflatable raft. No blankets, no diapers, no pads, no formula, no food. People travel by foot and travel by night, and they wait. A boy falls off a freight car and breaks both arms. People wait in encampments for their children, and they wait. Caged children's bodies are wrapped in mylar like tender commodities, like bags of chips, like hand grenades. They wait for frozen cheese sandwiches as snow falls like ash. They wait all day to play in a fenced-in courtyard, while around the block, the restaurants keep filling with people and emptying and filling. And I think about the work it takes to prepare those meals and serve them. Crops grown, produce picked, food shipped, linens bleached, tables bussed, credit cards charged. A weary swirl of finance crowds around the waist. So many items, so very many items and items. I think about who's making, who's buying, who's using all the items. Tender commodities like the bodies of detained children. Children sleep in a retail store cuddled by ghost commodities, nestled in rows upon rows of chain link fence, fluorescent lights, all day, all night, agents and cameras and agents and cameras. Bed pads on the concrete and bed pads on the concrete and wet wipes and wet wipes and wet wipes and wet wipes instead of showers and bags of chips and bags of chips and bags of chips and bags of chips. Next poem, thank you. The next poem I'm going to read is very much in dialogue with the poems that Judy read earlier, the two powerful poems. So I want to call back to those, very moving. This is called One Sugar or Two. One sugar or two. In Chicago, urban farmers have such a have such a surplus of eggs. They don't even barter, they just give them away. On the table is served a Dutch baby made of 6 eggs, 8 tablespoons of butter, little flour, little milk, pinch of nutmeg, a Dutch baby right out of the oven. Give me a piece of that baby, she says. Put some hot sauce on that baby, he says. I'm reminded of a man in Vermont pulling a stillborn sheep out from its moaning mother. The one born alive has cords wrapped around it, spindly legs that seem impossible, but within a week, the lamb is playing king of the mountain atop a heap of dung. Sheepskin on the sofa, sheepskin on the floor. I think of my friend's poem about the futility of writing poems about birthing animals, about pulling anything from death into life. Kids before guns, the teenager yells into the mic to a crowd of 500,000 at the Capitol. A gun without bullets is sold out of a truck for $200 to pay for dinner. With bullets, you can afford dessert. We don't actually need assault weapons to kill deer, a child hunter comments. This morning, high school students across the country walked out to protest gun violence, while at the same moment, a man walked into a Florida high school and shot a student. In Florida, almost all manatees bear scars from boat propellers. One is nicknamed No Tail. Everyone's especially sad when a boat kills a manatee that has what they call a milk-dependent baby. And thank you. I'm going to finish with two poems. One is called Resistance. That's the next one up. And I wrote this thinking about the work of Anselm Kiefer, the artist who has responded to the legacy of Germany's legacy of the Holocaust in really challenging and moving work. But as I was writing it and finishing up this poem, Russia began bombing the hell out of Ukraine, and the poem changed in its valence for me. So it has an epigraph from the Peruvian poet Cesar Vallejo, who's one of my favorite poets of all time. And the translation of these lines is given by Valentino Januzzi and Michael Smith, the Peruvian poet and the Irish poet, who worked together on this splendid translation of Cesar Vallejo. The graveyards were bombed, and the immortal dead of vigilant bones and everlasting shoulder. On their graves, the immortal dead, unfeeling, seeing, hearing, so low the evil, so dead the vile aggressors, resumed their unfinished mourning. So that's Cesar Vallejo on the graveyards in Spain being bombed by Franco. And I was reminded of this seeing Russia bombing Ukrainian graveyards. On the bed, a stain in the shape of a state or a city. No, it's shaped like a small town that belongs to one country invaded by another country and now reclaimed by the first country, although the inhabitants never hold citizenship in any sovereign nation. Their town batted back and forth, two dogs killing a mouse. Remember the bombed graveyard next door, headstones in shards. Even the dead are not safe. The dead are not safe. They're not safe. They're not the dead. The bed sits in a room filled with guilt vinegar, rust and shame, vinegar frustration. Dead stalks, grayed out honeycombed heads, women made of wire. A militarized border striates the room. Grave markers drape over the lead bed. Even the dead are not safe. The dead are not safe. They're not safe. They're not the dead. The women who sleep in the bed build boats of rust to sail on a sea of rust amidst scum and froth, mud and lead, breathing camphor, breathing vinegar, breathing the burnt smudges where water used to be, ash, still ash, dirt encrusted in cracks, ash, boats built of rust to sail on a sea of rust, ash, words scratched in flesh, words etched where sky had been, ash, boats laden with refuse, boats of scrap, a horizon scratched into the sky's husk, ash, waves etched in rust, ash on wire, ash on rust, water-stained scraps jut through waves of wire, waves of ash. The sea burnt and cracked. The sea needs camphor. The sea needs ash. Rub camphor on the sea, its lacerations and sores. The sea is sore, so sore. The sea is sore. Rust is growing, encroaching. Rub camphor on the sea, blisters of the sea. Let boats of ash sail on the sea of blisters. Let the boats scrape across the sea of wire, sea of rust, sea of ash. Let the boats scratch waves of wire, waves of ash. Let the boats scrape and scratch, for even the dead are not safe. The dead are not safe. They're not safe. They're not the dead. So I'll conclude with a poem called Meat and Honey, which is also written in response to a work of art. You can see a theme emerging. This is written in response to an installation by Damien Hirst that I saw at the Tate Gallery. And it's described in the poem, so I won't say any more. Meat and Honey. Heavy rubber curtains the doorway of a human-sized butterfly terrarium. We're instructed to proceed at a steady pace amidst insects gorging on honey. If the creatures had been houseflies, they would have been hideous, reminding me of my own corpse rotting. None of the rainbow covenant that's bundled into the butterfly. Well, what if they were small foxes or cats? Maybe their lifespan is too long, but it would make a hell of a durational piece. It's impossible to think of how many lives are happening amidst the wriggling filaments, the legs with the single claw. Impossible to think of those that have happened and ended, who are hungry, who are at home, who are broken, who are not at home, who are broken, who are falling right now. When I first discovered orgasms, I walked through the world in a haze, wondering why that wasn't what everyone does all day long. How can anyone talk of anything else? Now I think the same of death. How can anyone think of anything else? I'm terribly attached to my own consciousness. I'm at home in the scaffolding of my mind, the taste of my knees, the smell of my armpits, the beats my feet keep, those they don't, my compound eye, my proboscis. I imagine losing this. Imagine someone else passing through the rubber curtains, watching me feed on sugar water, spin a silk mat, shrug off my exoskeleton and eat it like an edible overcoat, and fall to the floor behind a trailing plant. It's devastating. And the crimson, orange, and yellow, the inexplicable gold chrysalis make a difference. Little angels, little widgets, pumping fluid into crumpled wings until they stiffen. Photographs are forbidden here, but they would be useless anyway. The point is to move and sweat, losing our signatures like a dancer's unmistakable ankle, or how she lifts a shoulder with curiosity as one might lift an eyebrow. My body inclines toward another. I sip the air with my tubular sucking organ. I'm a question made of meat and honey. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. Thank you very much, Rachel and Ricki. Thank you.
Yes, ditto to that. Both of you did wonderful stuff.
You know, and Rachel, in that last piece, you kind of gave me a segue to the question that's been going through my mind with both of you. And Ricki and Rachel, you can unmute yourself, because as we talk, you might interrupt each other, and that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. So, because I'm going to want you to also be able to bounce off each other. So, in the last poem, you were talking about have an orgasm. How is it that anybody could talk about anything else? But then you talk about death, and how can anybody talk about anything else? And so I was thinking about themes and or let me call it metaphorical landscape. And I'm just gonna ask you, Ricki, what was it about that made you smile?
About what?
I think when I said metaphorical landscape, and I may have read you wrong, but
No. I guess I don't know. I know with my work specifically, like every once in a while, like an image will just come into your head and you'll get obsessed about it, and that like becomes that sort of metaphorical landscape, I guess. So like I just like it was sort of a laugh of recognition more than anything.
Mhm.
Oh yeah. And because like we all have those, I think, as poets, like there's just something that we focus on for probably longer than necessary. But yeah, so that was that laugh, at least in my case.
so what would you say is yours? You say you return to it maybe more than you should, but I don't know that that's the case.
So there were in my coming out in Idaho poem. I had mentioned like we'd drink until the dogs came into the bar, and then we'd offer the dogs drinks. And like in this collection, I think that specific situation comes up like 2 or 3 times in different poems. Like, and when I was in undergrad, I studied with Georgia Calamares at what was IPFW in Fort Wayne. And one of the things that he said when I felt like I was stuck in a rut, sort of was, I said, I feel like I'm just constantly rewriting the same poem. And he basically just said, yes, we all kind of do that all the time. So like, that's okay. And as I've read more and written more, being able to pick up on other poets' sort of metaphorical obsession has helped me become comfortable with my own. There was something that Richard Hugo said in his book, The Triggering Town, that like everyone has their own sort of like their own word that they just keep coming back to. And like he said, his was green, and everything was green all the time. And that's okay. Like it's okay to be obsessed with a certain thing. And so like coming back to that dog in a bar, or my current project that I'm writing is like just really, really in love with androids, I guess, in trying to navigate the spaces between what's real and what's not, and reality and things like that. And like so many of the things, the images and references and allusions that I make, like they work around to trying to figure out that line of reality. So, and metaphor is the best way to talk about that, because I mean, metaphors aren't necessarily, they're no more real than reality anyway. So if that makes sense. I think that makes sense. Does that make sense? Yeah. Oh.
So Rachel, thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny. I do find myself, I relate to what you're saying, Ricki. You find yourself kind of worrying on, in the sense that a dog worries on a bone, right? Like chewing over a certain connection or cluster of things, or maybe there's this one idea or feeling or image that you can't let go of until you juice everything out of it somehow. And it's funny, in putting together this collection, I started writing another manuscript, which I'm working on now, and I thought it was something totally different. And then I realized, oh no, like a serious number of these poems are still working on the themes of Uterotopia. And so they ended up migrating into this book and are included here. So at first I was like, oh, I'm stealing my material from the next one that, has another shape to it. But I just wasn't done with it yet. I was still trying to work some things out. So, you work by intuition on some level, right? And try to see where your imagination is taking you.
So Rachel, if I were to identify loosely a couple of themes from the book, one is not orgasms as much as periods, menstrual products and all of that, and death.
Yeah, I mean, it's a book about, just the minor things in life, birth and death. That's, that's sort of
The minor thing.
stuff that happens in between.
Well, which is just interesting that you take these things that are so,
But they're connected, right? Like they're more connected than we realize. And the sort of deeper you dig into things, the more you feel those resonances. And it's a poem. It's a poetry collection about the things that people with uteruses have to deal with, different kinds of violences, violences in language, assault, other things. The poem, well, no one ever said breeding was easy. In some ways, I needed that constraint of the braided abecedarian. So it has 52 sections, like 2 times 26, because if I didn't, it would sort of go on forever because there's so many stories to include, and I didn't say this when I read it, but everything in that poem is true. It's something that I lived or somebody close to me lived, or I heard secondhand or something, but it's one that could sort of go on and on and on and on and sort of, it's,
and,
yeah.
I'm thinking that the collection is braided and you also use a lot of repetition, which kind of builds the tension and and power.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Ricki, you looked again like you were going to say something.
Oh, not really. I was agreeing a lot with the rhythmic, like the repetitious rhythmic portion of Rachel's work. And to me, I think that's probably the closest connection between our two bodies of work, at least that we've presented here, is just an obsession with the way that things sound and the way that you're pulled through things. So
yeah.
The thing, Ricki, that most struck me about your work is the themes of science, anatomy, the brain, and maybe that's where and then some kind of engineering stuff. And because that stuff fascinates me, I just want to remark on it, but also hear more of what your thoughts are about it.
yeah, that's something that has always been on my mind throughout my formal poetic training, is the way that we scaffold free verse, so-called formless poetry. Like we always have something going on in the background. And like I've always been interested in the way that different people construct their works. The first poem that I read, Concatenation, was like, it was initially just a group of relatively unconnected things that ended up being summarized by a quote from Jeff Vandermeer's textbook, Wonder Book, which is a creative writing fantasy textbook. And it has a whole bunch of different authors in it and various things about how they worked on certain pieces. And one of those sidebar articles was by Neil Gaiman. And he talked about how American Gods had come together over the course of 5 or 6 years. Like, he wrote the first scene and then it just came together in bits and pieces over the course of several years. And the thing that he said is novels accrete. They just sort of all coalesce together. And once I found the structure of accretion, I ended up looking at all of the other things that we refer to as like accreting or coalescing or coming together, things like the solar system and the dust bunnies and things like that. And being able to finally put so many disparate things together into a way that makes sense, at least to me, was like that's basically what poetry is from a writing standpoint for me. It's like taking all of these strange, disparate snippets and trying to hang them all together on a wire that is the same, hanging a bunch of different pieces of artwork on the same one. Yeah, it's always been there. And being a gigantic nerd and having a lot of different interests all just piles together as far as like the science.
You really do.
Yeah.
But you keep coming back to this, the anatomy and engineering and
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And like
A scientist in another life.
I was not, but I was going to go to architectural school. I do have an associate's in interior design, so I took the intro to architecture classes. So like that, yeah. There's so much fascinating. There are so many fascinating things to me in the world that people have done, and it astonishes me how much information there is in the world and how beautiful it can be. Even very ugly things. And I think Rachel's work does that too, is it contrasts the horrific and the beautiful and the unfortunate and the happy and like all of that stuff, the way that it all intermingles and
Rachel, I'm going
plays
to
off each other, I guess. Yeah.
I'm going to ask you to bounce off of that, but I do want to comment that you are able to talk about death with a lot of gravitas, but I don't feel like jumping out a window after you do that, which is
Good.
There are a lot of poems that take on such heavy issues, and yet and you do kind of get overwhelmed with all of it.
Well,
But you
thank
don't
you.
even have to respond to that, because
No, I appreciate it. I appreciate it. It's hard to figure out how to balance things. So I'm glad you feel that that's working. A lot of these poems were born out of a feeling that this is true of my last book as well. Like I don't know how to talk about these things. And so I keep trying and trying and trying to find a way to talk about them and find different forms. And maybe that sense of dissatisfaction or incompletion or something is what pushes me to keep writing and to find other ways of approaching things. But Ricki, speaking of form, I understand what you're saying about like the importance of repetition. And even when writing free verse form, it's something I always tell my students, that poetry, so much about poetry is about setting a pattern and then breaking it, right? And doing it in an interesting way. So you set a pattern and then you have surprise, which I think is something that Charles Baudelaire said a long time ago in the 1850s about our need for monotony and surprise, especially in art. But I think that's right. So even if you're not, writing a sonnet or writing something in couplets or a ghazal or something like that. You set some kind of pattern, and then you detour, you depart from it in some way.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Would you say that again about the need for both? Was it boredom?
I mean, I think Baudelaire says monotony and surprise.
monotony.
Yeah. I
And
tell my
what-
students pattern and breaking with a pattern, because I don't want them to seek out monotony, because somehow that doesn't sound right. Not what I should be urging them toward,
So monotony and
surprise.
okay, surprise. And the reason why that caught my attention is that I'm in the mental health field, but I also know a whole lot about the brain. And as one brain guy that I studied with talked about exactly that, about how the brain requires both no change, the lack of change, something you can get comfortable with so that you're not constantly being like overstimulated by the new, but the need for the new, or else, your brain, I'm kind of going off a little bit, but gets too sluggish and needs some of that stimulation. Just throwing that out there. I don't know if I have anything to say, but maybe even because I'm noticing the time, maybe the two of you could just say something you want to say by the way of last comments or remarks, or if you have a question for each other.
I mean, I just say, if I may, that I'm just really appreciative of this space that you've created, and for talking to us about the work afterwards. And, still feeling like we're coming out of the extended lockdown period and sort of the need for community and coming together around things. So I'm just really appreciative and grateful to have this together in this space and with whomever is watching on YouTube right now. So I just, I'd like to thank you both for the effort that you put into this, and to everyone for being present in this space.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to second that, because I have so many friends that are spread out, and there's no way that most of my friends can come to any single reading that I might have. And with the world the way that it is, it's increasingly difficult for in-person events to be held wherever they need to be, to meet people and share with them. So thanks very much for having me and us.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
There's two things I want to say about that. Well, three things. One is, would people please donate money to the link that Al put in the chat, because we like to pay our poets. So that was one thing. Another, I've forgotten, about us continuing to be a virtual reading, partially because Al and I both are given the opportunity to be in our alternate spaces, like Wisconsin or Mexico or who knows where next. And it's so great to be able to see those of you from all different places. The last thing I wanted to say was in response to your appreciation of the Q&A part. I really do love it. And, there's the poetry, and then there's the intelligence that goes into talking about what went into it or what comes out of it. And This was just a lovely, intelligent and wide-ranging conversations. You both were drawing on so many other people's wisdom, not only your own. So thank you.
Yeah.
Al?
There's not much else to say. Really enjoyed the conversation, and I think, it's just, it's really gratifying to be able to do this. We've been doing it a long time, and both Nina and I do it just because we enjoy it, so, we enjoy having people, the open micers and our features, and give us a chance to be in touch with the poetry world, and make a space for other poets. So anyway, so thank you all for being here. And I think we're up to our time, but thank you all for joining us tonight.
Thank
we'll
you
look
all.
forward to-
Second Monday of the month. Join us, watch for our event invitations and our postings on who we're going to have each month.
Okay.